So what you've got to realize is that gut, that little voice that you have in your gut, that's not the true you. What that is that's your dopamine-starved brain that is acting just like a caveman that wants it now. And so it's important that you put that thing to rest and that you make decisions based upon the data, not upon your gut.
Well, welcome to an historical moment in the Keynote Curators. This is our first live conversation in the virtual place with none other than a longtime friend and colleague, Graeme Newell. I'm going to tell you a little bit about...
Honored, buddy, to be the first one. Thank you so much for having me here today. We are going to make some history. Fantastic.
This is live history. So we're going to get into some really cool conversations around finance, financial services, but more importantly, the thinking and the behavior behind what we do as humans that is often in our subconscious or that we're not aware of on a deep enough level to empower us in a way that can make a difference for our everyday life, our long-term life, for our family, for our businesses, and beyond. So let me just give you a little bit of an introduction here for Graeme. As I said, he's a professional speaker, but also a behavioral science researcher who uses the latest science research to show financial professionals how to make smarter decisions, uncovering vulnerable situations when business leaders are most susceptible to impulsive decision-making. His presentations are filled with fascinating tech games, prizes, and fun interactions that teach professional financial pros to use behavioral financial techniques to optimize decision-making. So I kind of stammered through that, but there is some cool stuff we're going to get into with regard to some little games and some mind exercises to uncover, and I like the word reveal, what's happening just below the surface that once revealed and uncovered can make a really big difference. So Graeme, I just want to start with when I was researching, and we've had these conversations ongoingly during the pandemic and for years now, but this bias for action, it intrigues me because I often talk with colleagues and family members. There's a phrase I use called moving the deck furniture on the ship, where it's a metaphor for we feel like we're active, we feel like we're productive, we're moving the furniture around, but what's really being produced? So could you bring us into that kind of bias for action and the research you've done and what you've found that's made a difference for people?
You bet. So let me tell you, we're going to be talking today about some specific things that planners or any of us that deal with money decisions are going to be able to do in order to make smarter money decisions. So let me talk a little bit about kind of my background. So I started out my career, I was in the world of marketing and did a lot of work on financial planning ads. So what I do is I take a brain scanner and we actually throw people inside of them, and then we ask them to make decisions about their money. So what's neat is that we can look inside a person's brain at the very moment that they're making that kind of a financial decision. So we use things like EEG headsets and galvanic skim response to tell the exact moments when people were making decisions and exactly how they were feeling. I use things like eye tracking technology, and we can see exactly what people look at when they go in stores and are making purchasing decisions. So we combine all this eye tracking with brain scanning. And now what we can do is we can measure the stimulation levels and people's emotional state. Finally, what we do is we correlate those to specific purchasing data. Now, whether it's on a website that people are roaming around and looking for specific things, we can match where they looked and look at exactly how their brain did. So little known fact, our pupils dilate when we feel something emotional. Well, what's neat is using this new technology, we can measure that. We also use things like facial coding to read the micro expressions on people's faces. These are the tiny little movements that your face does, and we can see the exact moment when people get bored or hostile or whatever it is. So what's neat is that now we can see both the conscious and the subconscious reaction that people have. And so my career has been all about helping people to understand exactly the crazy bad ways that we make money decisions. Now, one of the ones that we just talked about was the idea of bias for action. Now, particularly for those of us in the financial services community, man, what is so important to us is that we make sure that we never get caught napping. We're always looking at what all the new data is. So this is one of the things that we call a cognitive bias. There's about 200 of them. These are the things that our brain does in order to do a better job of being able to handle the anxiety that we feel. And that's exactly what we feel in bias for action. Well, what happens is something bad usually happens to us, and we are not happy with where we are. We just don't want to sit there. What we want to do is we want to do something about it. So we have
a little bit, Graeme, is this a little bit like a survival instinct or a flight or fight?
Absolutely. What these are is all of the things that we do, all of our emotions, they were hardwired back on the African savanna during evolutionary times. It's a very different world than we live in right now. So what bias for action does is, out on the African savanna, when we were being chased by a lion, it made sense for us to react quickly and run away and do something. Well, not much has really changed on that. We still have that same kind of caveman brain. We simply haven't had time for our brains to catch up. For most of the 2 million years of human evolution, it's been all about survival. Things like not starving to death and finding a cave so you didn't freeze to death. And maybe if you're lucky, finding a good-looking cave lady to pass along your DNA to the next generation. Fancy skills like agriculture and living in houses, that's just the last 10,000 years. So our brain is hardwired to do something. And our caveman brain has never seen something as complex as a financial market. And so what we have a tendency to do is to default to those caveman behaviors. And for us, that bias for action, that's what that's all about. I'm going to do something and I'm going to feel better. Yet maybe in the market, the best thing you need to do is wait it out. And typically what happens in financial markets is that we have a tendency to move at what's the worst point. So either you've just experienced a loss, and what are you going to do? You're going to desperately try to fix it, usually at a time when there are fewer options. Or maybe you've just experienced a big win and you feel good. Well, what happened during caveman times when we experienced a big win? Well, that was that kill that we went and we got that deer or whatever. Right. We got all that food. So what are we going to do? We're going to gorge ourselves. We're going to eat because we didn't know we'd get food again. And we do the same thing in financial markets. What we'll do is we'll have a win and we'll go, well, I'm going to buy more at the very point when it might be overpriced.
Gotcha. So, you had mentioned a lot of the facial recognition, the pupils. There's a lot of science, brain science, if you will, behind that. What have been the biggest breakthroughs in that science in recently? And even those who understand the science, are there still mistakes being made in either the use of that science or the resistance of it? And how do you, in the bigger picture, Graeme, see it being played out on day-to-day life with whether it's financial services, financial advisors, in that world?
Seth, no question, this brain stuff that we're doing is still in its infancy. We've still got a long way to go to understand it. So what we can understand right now is really basically things like stimulation levels. We can tell whether a person's bored or checked out really easily. And we can also tell if they're engaged. We can watch their brain activity going when we put an EEG headset on them or put them in an fMRI. But what we can't tell is a specific emotion that they're feeling. But it's been revelational for me is that I'll take people, I would show them some sort of a sales pitch or a financial services ad, and then they'd look me in the eye and I'd say, did you like that? And they would go, oh, I thought that was just fantastic. I really like that. And yet what we can see is from the eye tracking data, from the brain scan data, they were bored out of their mind. They were looking off. Their brain was completely flat. They didn't like it, but they want to think that they liked it. You see? And this is how we go about in our daily decisions every single day. We have this vision of who we feel as though we want to be in our own mind. And we're going to think that the reason we made that decision was for a very different reason than why we actually did. That's because what we know is that most of our brain activity, most of our decision-making process is completely subconscious to us. Brain research tells us that about 85% of our decisions are completely subconscious. So what happens is we feel something, and then our conscious brain makes a decision, and then our conscious brain affirms what we already believe. Now, it feels like a conscious decision. Now,
Right.
the analogy that I always like to use is one of a man riding an elephant. So no question, the elephant, is in control. The man can kind of suggest which way it will go. Well, that
Right.
conscious brain, that's the man on the elephant. But the subconscious brain, that's what's running our life. It really is.
So there's like a latency or delay, but there's also like this myth or this illusion of control, which I gather could lead to bad decisions, even in the face of having all of the science that says otherwise.
Absolutely. Seth, you've probably got friends that are, you sit down at the table with whatever, and they kind of go, yeah, I'm going to buckle down and get on that diet, or I'm going to, stop spending so much time on TV. And we all know they're never going to make it, but they think they are. That's because we've got that reason where we know those people, and we can kind of see that their instinctual brain's going to run them. And a lot of times we think our conscious brain has much more decision-making power than it does. And particularly in the world of financial services, we are dealing with things that are very emotional. We lose large amounts of money. We gain large amounts of money. And the moment that we have those either disappointments or we have those things that go really well for us, our brain gets flooded with different chemicals. And in a sense, we go a little insane. So that's why you've got to take that decision-making process, particularly on those big decisions of things that you want to do. And you've got to do them at times that you're unemotional, because you are quite literally a little insane when you do that, either high or low. And that's
Right.
what you want to avoid.
But with money in particular, whether you're a financial advisor, a wealth planner, or the client, or even, for example, Graeme, working in the ancillary services around it, whether you're a meeting planner or a conference organizer in this world, you're around people that are incredibly bright, incredibly independent, often entrepreneurial in spirit. And conceptually, they know better that this emotion is something that really should be put to the wayside. But when it comes to their own personal finances or their own personal decisions in their business or their, entrepreneurial efforts, emotion plays a much larger role or a heavier weight in the calculus of what action should be taken. My question is this: what have you seen based on your research and then based on the work that you've done, whether it's in speaking or consulting, where you've been able to distinguish the distinction between the emotion and then what the science and how they've been able to avoid the impulse? How has that bridge been crossed, and what impact have you seen it make?
We tend to think that we are better at things than we really are. And so a lot of us have really gotten into that idea of, I'm just going to trust my gut because it's going to really help me to make those decisions that are rock sure. And so we end up going on intuition. Now, what we know from the studies that we do when we look at the science is that those decisions that you make on intuition tend to be the most foolish ones that you can do. In the world of financial services, it's about trusting the data. And there are some people that are these amazing quants that'll be able to take the emotion out of that decision, and they'll be able to make a decision based purely on the data. But that's not most of us. So what you've got to realize is that gut, that little voice that you have in your gut, that's not the true you. What that is that's your dopamine-starved brain that is acting just like a caveman that wants it now. And so it's important that you put that thing to rest and that you make decisions based upon the data, not upon your gut. And this is where most folks in financial services tend to go awry.
And when is that? Is there a specific moment? A lot of, I've seen a lot of experts and and not just in finance, but behaviorists, psychologists talk about, the rhythm of the day or the blood sugar level, or what level of personal self-awareness does one have where you get bad news, something happened with your child at school, or the hot water heater needs to be replaced, or your wife got into a car accident. What is it that has us be in a place where we're unaware or not in a place to make the best decisions?
It typically happens at times when we're under stress. And for a lot of us, that's all day long is what it's about. So what we've got to do is bring our best Buddhist financial strategy to it. And what do I mean by that? Well, what that means is if you've ever done any meditation, what you know is you sit down and you basically say, okay, I'm going to look at how I feel right now. And those are the things that great folks in financial planning learn to do. They kind of go, I'm excited today, or I'm nervous, or I'm happy, or I'm calm. When you notice that, and then you give yourself this rule that you say, look, when I'm really sad, really stressed, or really happy, I'm not going to make big decisions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to defer those to a time when my rational brain can come back online. So what I like to refer to it is when your elephant is napping, that's when you want to make those big decisions, because those are the decisions that are really going to allow you to make those decisions based on the data, as opposed to making them on that instinct. You've got to realize your instinctual brain does not know how to do a financial market. Imagine if you took a caveman and threw him into, Wall Street. He'd freak out. And that's what your instinctual brain is doing all day long.
Right. And I guess the skill, if it's called something different, please tell me, but the skill is, how do you, develop that awareness when the elephant is napping or looking out for it? And when the stress and the emotion of the stress takes that foothold and is dominating your emotional state, what tips, tricks, tools are there to ebb the tide and get that elephant back into a sleeping, napping state so that you can do the best work for yourself and your clients?
I think one of the neatest things that we've gotten from our mobile phones right now, like Apple has something that is basically a stand and stretch moment, or a, get up from my desk moment. Mm-hmm. If you can take those kind of moments to take those little 30-second breaks or even 10-second breaks and just kind of go check in and kind of go, how am I feeling right now? And am I at a place where I can make good rational decisions? By simply noticing when you're upset, that's how you'll be able to make better decisions.
Gotcha. Interesting. We in preparing for this, we had talked about maybe offering up some exercises or a little bit of a game that you could share with everybody and manifest how the unconscious works, or what's just under the surface that's hidden from our view. Would this be a good time? Would you be able to share that now?
It sounds great. Let me show you just how powerful your subconscious brain can be here. So let's do a little exercise, okay? So Seth, what I want you to do is, first of all, I'd like you to pick a number between 1 and 5.
In my head. I'm not going to say it out loud.
Yeah. In your head. Just
I got my number.
Okay, that sounds good. Now, next, I want you to multiply that number by 9.
I got it.
Excellent. Now this is going to give you a 2-digit number. Now, next, I want you to add together the 2 digits of that number. So, for example, if your number was 45, you'd add together the 4 and the 5 to get that new number.
Got it.
Excellent. Now, next, I want you to subtract 5 from that number. Now, this is going to be your final number, okay?
Okay, I'm there.
Excellent. Now, I want you to take that number and I want you to convert it to a letter. So, for example, 1 is A, 2 is B, 3 is C, and so on.
Okay, I'm with you.
Excellent. Now, quickly pick a country that begins with that letter.
Geography. I love it. I got it.
Okay. Next, I want you to take the last letter of your country and I want you to think of an animal that starts with that letter.
I'm there.
Okay. Now, using the last letter of the animal you chose, I want you to think of a color that starts with that letter.
Okay. I got the color.
Okay. So now, Seth, we've just got one problem. You're never going to find an orange kangaroo in Denmark.
That's exactly what I chose, an orange
Yeah.
kangaroo in Denmark. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did I know that you would pick that letter? How did I predict that? Well, let me tell you, I know that your brain is lazy, and I gave your instinctual brain a few shortcuts that it could take. So your conscious brain didn't notice any of these. So for example, I don't know if you noticed, but I made the background color of the letters orange for the folks
Ah,
that are watching on video today. So
that's
your
kind of
subconscious
sneaky.
brain didn't
Kind of
notice that.
sneaky.
Yeah, and your conscious brain did. Also, what I did was I gave you the exact number of letters in the graphic that I showed. You know, your instinctual brain noticed this, your conscious brain didn't. So again, it's that 85% of our decision-making process completely hidden from us. Only 15% of our brain is a conscious decision. So you've got to remember that our brain is not about that conscious, our decisions are not about that conscious brain. They're about that instinctual brain. And all I got to do is flash up a picture of a hamburger, and your caveman is going to be convinced that he's starving to death right now. It's absolutely hardwired into you. I mean, just try going on a diet. You know what's going to happen. And we think we have control over these emotions. But what we know, particularly in the world of financial services, we have a tendency to get overconfident. And now what we do is we act on our gut. We take the data and kind of go, I'm not sure it's really true. We want to rely more on that data because that's what will lead us to the best decisions.
That's a really cool exercise. You know, I think we would be remiss if we didn't discuss a little bit of your research and what you have found as it relates to the pandemic and COVID and people's behavior, which is an extremely stressful time, which what we've learned today, and maybe we've known instinctually, is that often the best decisions aren't made under stress or duress. But this has been an unusually atypical, anomalous, prolonged, ongoing, constant, I don't have any more synonyms, stressful time. So with specificity in the context of the pandemic and COVID, what have you learned? What have you seen with people that you've been working with?
Well, Seth, the thing that you got to remember is that our brains are hardwired to, first and foremost, to keep us safe. And that's what it's going to do first and foremost in all the decisions that we make. So we've got people who are afraid of water. Well, let me tell you, what's that about? Well, that's about people who didn't have that fear of water. They were the ones that ended up drowning and didn't pass along their DNA to the next generation. Have you ever wondered why some people have a fear of open spaces? Well,
yeah, I've never really understood that one.
Yeah, the reason is because open spaces were where our ancestors were most likely to be spotted and run down by predators. And so that is our caveman brain talking there. Ever wonder why snuggling under the covers feels so incredibly great? Well, the reason is because millions of years ago, hiding is what kept us from being eaten. Our caveman brain has those sensations. So we're all about that fear right now. And when something happens, like we get robbed in our car or things like that, you got to realize this is not a rational experience. What it's about is our caveman brain coming back. And so with the pandemic, what we know is that everybody right now is just a little afraid. And so we've probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It starts at the bottom with those basic survival things, and then safety comes up then. When we get to the top, it's about those higher intellectual things. Well, everybody's been moved down Maslow's hierarchy of needs right now. The reason is because we are simply afraid. And folks are going to tell you, hey, I'm fine. I'm dealing with this pandemic just great. But what the brain research shows us, that's not true at all. They're not fine. And as much as they want to convince themselves that they are, they aren't. So what we've got to realize is that any conversations that we have with clients, any work that we do in our own financial services portfolio, it's going to be very much geared towards the idea of safety right now. because we are operating in fight or flight mode.
Mhm.
And that's not gonna go away until we get through this thing right now. So any financial decisions that we're making or any recommendations that you're giving to clients right now, those are things that you're going to want to give, an opportunity to change again in 6 months, because odds are they're not going to be making the best choices, and you're not going to be making the best choices either. So what that's about now is revisiting the plan that you had before the pandemic started. Go back and revisit that plan and see if it still makes sense for you. And if it does, you probably want to stick with that over the course of the next little while. So what I like to do, just like any good planner is going to do, you're going to create upside and downside limits for everything that you're going to do. Doing that in our personal life, in our financial life. But most folks right now are saying, oh, it's a new situation. I need to throw those old goals out. Well, now's the time to take that long-term approach. Come back to those goals, because odds are they're probably pretty sound. And revisiting and sticking with them, that's what we want to do right now, because we're all just a little insane.
Especially if they were made during a sober, clear-minded, non-stressful, period where the focus was really razor sharp. Let me ask you, it's personal because this is what you do. This is your life's work. But what is it that you're working on right now that has you really excited? Like specifically something that you're excited about that you're involved with work?
Seth, the thing that I am loving so much is I'm working on some brand new presentations now that are implementing some of the latest brain research that we have. And so what's neat is we've been taking people and throwing them inside of MRIs, putting EEG headsets on them right now. And we're identifying the specific situations when people really make bad mistakes, particularly people in the financial services industry. So the way we do that is we actually play games with them. We play little financial games, and we see exactly who falls victim to making those impulsive decisions. Who are the people that are more measured, and exactly how did they do that? So it's all about recognizing the signs of you're about to make a bad choice, and then kind of shutting that down and kind of going, whoa, I realize the signs here that this is about to be a really bad choice. And so we've been able to identify what those are on a brain level, and to be able to help all kinds of executives to really recognize those bad decision points, the situations when they're most likely to do that, and then how to shut that down and get back on track.
Got it. Now, knowing what you know in the background of the research that you're generating and you're responsible for, is it obvious some of the crazy things you see and hear, or are there things that still surprise you, or you're surprised that you're surprised given what you know? And what are one or two of the crazy stories or crazy bad decisions, within this research that you've come across?
I would say no question. It is an interesting time in this industry. The tools are getting better and better and better, and we're able to use things like machine learning and AI now in order to see exactly how people are making these decisions. Let me tell you what one of the most interesting uses of AI for this thing is. I just did a big study where we basically took people, put eye tracking glasses on them, and then sent them through stores, and then we read their brain waves as they looked around the store at signs, at displays, and things like that. And what we were able to do was we put 200 or 300 people through that store, and then we did machine learning on them. And we were able to tell exactly what they looked at, what were the things that would catch their attention. Well, now that we've done that, we actually don't even need to use people anymore, because the machine learning learned what people will look at. So we can take any video, any sales pitch, any marketing video, put it through that technology and tell exactly how effective it will be. It's frightening how good that this stuff is really getting these days.
And so on the user side of that, whether it's the marketing company or the business person or the wealth advisor, is the use of that technology then what's being displaced or replaced by using that technology?
Well, what we're doing is we're taking the behavior of traders, of financial analysts, and we're putting all that into machine learning. We're seeing exactly what their picks are, and then we see exactly what the behaviors are that they're manifesting, and then we compare that with their track record, how they did, whether those paid off. And we're able to identify now that when traders get in this specific situation, this is when they're most likely to mess up. And that's exciting because it's all about smarter decisions through brain science.
Right. And using that technology, that machine learning, might then, am I to assume, free that person up to be more creative, to attend to clients more, to provide better service? Is that one of the effects that you've seen?
Some of it, probably more of what it's going to be about, is really getting control of their own decision-making process. And what we find is that it not only pays off really well in their professional life, but also in their personal life. How to make those great big decisions that are so important about college and kids and money and finance and marriage and all of those things in our lives. We tend to make those on gut. And there are new ways, different ways, more rational ways to make those decisions that will have better outcomes. Brain science has figured that out. And that's what's most exciting about this.
So it can either reaffirm somebody who has a consistent track record of producing, even in the face of great stress. And even that high performer can be exposed or have uncovered for them or revealed for them some of the areas that might be deficient or could be operating at a higher level.
Absolutely. And what's exciting and what this technology allows us to do is it allows us to recognize our mistakes before we make them.
Aha, that's key. Well, listen, we've been on, for a long time now, and it's been very informative, but I still, if you don't mind, just stick around for one more question, which I really want to hear what you have to say about, and it's using, financial storytelling and how that motivates us, because I'm curious about where you see it applied, how you see it deployed, the creative side of it, and how it's used.
And I have to tell you, particularly in the financial services industry, I tend to see that some of the worst storytelling skills out there tend to be with us right here. Why? Because we have a tendency to be data people. I just have avalanches of data. But what we know is, particularly for financial planners or those working with others, the more data that you give people, typically the worse decisions that they make. So let me give you an example of this.
Interesting.
So one of the they were testing a brand new they were testing a jam, and they gave people a whole series of these jams. So they started the research project and they said, okay, we're going to give these to professional taste testers is what we're going to do. And the professional taste testers tasted all the jams and they ranked them from 1 to 10. Then they just took a random group of people and they gave them those same jams. And we said, we'd like you to rank them from 1 to 10 is what we'd like you to do. Well, they came back, and what's neat is the experts and the average population did a really great job of having pretty much the same results for those jams. But then they took a different group of just average people and they said, okay, we want you to taste each jam, but after each taste, we'd like you to write a short paragraph on exactly what was good or bad about that jam.
A short paragraph.
Yeah, a short paragraph to say, I really liked it was sweet here, but I didn't like the finish and the color wasn't good. And what they found was when they asked people to describe how they made their decisions, they made horrible decisions. they were 10 times worse. And so what we know is that the more choices you give people, the worse choices they have a tendency to make. Why is that? It's because we're afraid that we're going to make the bad choice. Research tells us that we have much greater fear of loss than we have pleasure of gain. So Seth, if I were to give you $20, you would feel, a given amount of pleasure. But then if I were to come back to you and say, I'm sorry, Seth, I need that $20 back, you would feel double the pain that you felt of the pleasure. And so oftentimes our brain is designed not to lose. And particularly with clients, that's what they have a tendency to do, is they play not to lose.
Right. And that is fear-based, and that fear is grounded in stress and distress and a survival type of instinct.
Yeah. And so with the storytelling that we're talking about here, our brain is hardwired for stories. Why? Because out on the African savannah, telling a story around the campfire meant that you could learn all that great knowledge about where the water supply was, or a good food source, or a danger to avoid. And it could all be done with a story. You didn't have to experience it. So our brains are hardwired for stories. No question. That's why we love movies and books and novels and, all these things. What we've got to make sure we're doing with our clients is not giving them these walls of data, but specifically putting them in stories. So for each one of our financial planners or folks that are dealing with clients out there, do you have a repertoire of 20 or 30 stories that each demonstrate how somebody in your world did a certain thing? So if you want to talk about saving more for college, do you have a story ready to go about somebody who did or didn't do that? Because we always want to be making these points with stories, not be making them with data. The more you throw charts in front of people, the more they're going to recoil.
Right. I think people relate to the stories and the anecdotes, especially, with being confidential or respectful of specific names or other clients. You can still say, a client of mine who's been with me for 15 years, child just started college, and, you can share the anecdote. I gather, keep it brief, but vivid, and be clear about what the anecdote, the intention, or the purpose of that share, like you mentioned, whether it's a saving story or a transition in life story or something like that. I think that that's interesting, particularly in the background of tweets and Instagram and Facebook, which are really just sound bites, which have a shelf life of about 20 seconds or so. At least I've heard that.
And Seth, the rule that I like to follow is that as a financial advisor or as somebody who's working with people with financial products, the rule is 80-20. Let your clients talk 80% of the time, telling their story, and you talk 20. Keep your mouth shut and sit there and listen, because that's the greatest value that you can bring to them, letting them tell their story, hearing their pain, talking about their insecurity, and let them work through it on their own. That's how we end up really helping clients with strategies that stick. They come to those decisions on their own with just a little nudge from us.
That's great. Graeme, I think that that's a great point to complete this conversation. I know we've talked about having you back in the beginning of the year in the first quarter, and I look forward to that. And we'll dig deeper into a lot more of your research and maybe take it down from a higher level and get into a little bit more under the hood, if you will. But thank you. Thank you, first of all, for your time, for making history with us, and for sharing what I truly believe. I know we've talked about this, and I've watched your work, your videos, and you've worked for my clients, for providing insights and distinctions for people in their lives, their work lives, which then translates into their personal lives, that make a difference and a lasting, impactful difference. And, it's easy to say thank you and it's easy to hear it, but all that difference you're making that you don't see is just really incredibly admirable. So thank you for that, for the difference you're making for people out there.
Oh, Seth, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. If anybody wants to learn more about behavioral finance, I just recommend you check me out on YouTube. Just look for my name. It's spelled Graeme, and then the last name is Newell, Newell. Or you can just go to graemenewell.com. I've got more than 100 videos that'll teach you all about behavioral finance in ways that you can put it to use in your own practice, in your own life.
Terrific. And we'll be able to post that up on our YouTube channel as well, and make sure that everybody can get directly to the source. We'll have links to everything that you just pointed to. So thank you so much, and have a great holiday season, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Same to you, Seth. Looking forward to more episodes. Thanks so much.
You got it.